You just figure out exactly what you want and why you want it. So that's what I did. I knew exactly what I wanted, and I knew exactly why I wanted it. And my friends didn't understand, and I didn't even try to explain it to them. I mean, one time I told this guy, I've just been reading these books, and they say to figure out what you want. I want to make $100,000 a year, which is $8,333 a month. And so that's, I'm supposed to put it up on my wall, look at it every day. And my friend says, yeah, but how are you going to do it? I said, I don't know. That's none of my business. And he's like, you're such an idiot. You got to know how. If you don't know how, how's it ever going to happen? And the cool thing is, I didn't know how, but it happened. And it happened in a very short period of time. It happened from that time, that was 1990. That was 1998, and by 2002, I was earning well over a six-figure a year income. So,
wow,
yeah, it works.
Yeah, and how did it work? How
does it work?
Yeah.
Well, the how is different for everybody, and that's why they don't teach the hows. Because if they say, okay, here's how you're going to write a book and you're going to sell 1 million copies. Well, what if people aren't good at writing? What if they don't know how to write a book? So there's never here's the recipe for how you're going to do it. The only how recipe is, and it's basically not even how, it's what. It's what are you going to do? And so for me, some of the tips that I've used is stop thinking about what you don't want and only think about what you do want. And for anybody that visits your site, I'll give you one of the most powerful nuggets that I think I could ever share, and it's this. The biggest challenge in becoming successful, in overcoming poverty, whether it be relational poverty or financial poverty or spiritual poverty, the hardest thing in the world to do is to think wealth and abundance when you're poverty-stricken, when you're poor. It's so hard to do that. When your relationship isn't working, it's hard to think about a blissful relationship and how wonderful things could be. As human beings, we have a natural tendency to think about what is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What is? Whatever's going on. Well, my dog is sick. My bank account is overdrawn. My relationship is not working, right? We have a tendency to focus on what is. And in these teachings, and what I teach people today is that you can't focus on what is. If you continue to focus on what is, you will continue to get more and more of what is. The only way for you and I to get what we want is to focus on what we want. That's it. I mean, that's like the number one thing. And people, they get a bounce check in the mail. Their bank account is overdrawn, and oh my gosh, my bank account is overdrawn. And what they're doing with that thought and with that emotion is they're actually creating more bounced checks. It was As a Man Thinketh, which is a great, one of the all-time greatest books about the power of our thoughts and the power of our mind. As a man thinketh, that's an old Bible phrase that says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Well, when I first read that, I thought, what does that mean, as a man thinketh in his heart? Normally you would think we think in our brain. But he says, the ancient script says that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Well, as I've studied that, I realized that as we think and as we feel, so are we. So the things that we think about and feel about come about. And what most people do when they're not happy, and I know your blog is about happiness, right? About how to live a happy, successful life. What most sad people do is they think about why they're sad. What most depressed people do is they think about how they're depressed. Right?
I did it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we've all experienced it. What most broke people do is they think about being broke. And you just go on down the list. Whatever it is that people struggle with, the reason they're struggling with that is because it's what they think about. And what we think about and feel about comes about in our life.
So what would be your practical advice to stop focus on the things that are not going great in your life and starting focus on the things you want, really want?
Well, two things. Number one, I use two techniques. One of them is called cancel, cancel. And this has worked so well for me over the years. As humans, we're always going to have negative thoughts. We're always going to have limiting beliefs, right? We're always going to, there's always some kind of a battle up here going on. And so the question is, it's not how do you eliminate the negative thoughts completely. How do you get, you can't, we're humans. But you can implement some techniques that will help you do it less and less and less. And I guess I'll talk about cancel in a moment. The first one that I want to talk about is rubber band therapy. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but you put a rubber band around your arm, and anytime you observe yourself thinking negatively, having any kind of a negative, doubtful, faithless thought, you pull that rubber band back as far as you can and just let it loose. And and it'll hurt. And I got a big rubber band because I thought that would hurt, worse, like the really thick rubber band, but it didn't really hurt. And I found that the skinnier the rubber band is, the better. And I would pull that rubber band and let it go and pop myself. And it really helped me. I used to have a lot of negative thoughts, especially about success, because my life wasn't successful. And so I would pop myself all day long. Psh, psh, psh. And over time, I started having less and less negative thoughts, because it was hurting me. I was like, I don't want to have those thoughts anymore. So you kind of train yourself to have positive thoughts. The other principle is the cancel principle. We can never eliminate the negative thoughts completely. So when I have a negative thought, for example, on my blog, I've shared my personal financial goal for 2011. 2010 is kind of my preparatory year. 2011 is my year to have quantum growth, quantum leaps, and to experience an income that I've never experienced before. And my goal for 2011 is $3 million in personal income. That's a lot of money in every country, to make $3 million. And it's a stretch for me. My original goal was to make $1 million. I've never made $1 million in a 12-month period of time. And so that was my original goal. But here's what I found with my original goal is I was comfortable with it. Like I knew I could do it. It was like there wasn't this, I don't know, that's a big goal. And my mentor, Bob Proctor, who's the best-selling author of You Were Born Rich, he challenged me to go for millions. He's like, come up with a big goal that's going to make you uncomfortable. If you're comfortable with your goal, it's not big enough. You're not going to stretch. You're not going to grow enough if you're comfortable with that goal. So I had a goal to make $1 million. And I was pretty comfortable with that. And I said, you know what? I'm going for $3 million. So that is the goal. Well, just this morning, I had this thought of, oh man, that's a lot of money, $3 million. And immediately I caught myself. I didn't have my rubber band. I'm going to get that on. Yeah, after the interview, I'll put one back on. But I did use the cancel. So it's like cancel. So when you say something that's negative or you think something that's negative, say cancel. That kind of stops it, right? It kills the life. It kills the energy, the life force of that which you have spoken. So it kind of stops it, but then I will reaffirm what I want. I'm happily and easily attracting all the opportunities necessary to enjoy $3 million in the year 2011. So you say cancel, that stops it, and then reaffirm your goal.
You just say cancel.
Cancel.
Just that. And you turn around the bad thing, the bad thought.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And let me explain that real quick, because I believe with everything that's in me that when we think a thought, we are and Napoleon Hill talks about broadcasting. It's like we're a radio tower. You know, we're always broadcasting something. And we can broadcast with our thoughts, we can broadcast with our words, and we can broadcast with our emotions. You know, you don't have to speak it to broadcast it. If you're feeling it, you're emitting, you're pulsating this energy out into the universe. And the universe responds to what we transmit, right? What we communicate to it, either through through thought, voice, or emotion. Whatever we put out there is going to come back on us, right?
Yeah.
And so if you have a negative thought, you're broadcasting. You're putting this negative something out there. And the reason I like to say cancel, cancel, and I believe Jack Canfield taught me this, but when you say cancel, cancel, it disrupts that energy that you've put out into the universe. Does that make sense? It kind of stops it, right? It's like, whoa, 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 I'm just kidding. You know, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. And then you say with emotion what you really desire. I am happily and easily attracting everything that I need to. It's like, yeah, so you're putting that out there, the positive energy instead of the negative. So the rubber band reminds you, or whatever reminds you is going to come. The rubber is going to come. The rubber us. From the rubber, if you haven't remind you podcast, remind you, putting this, remind you out there, remind you, and the rubber.
You talk about law of attraction, no? The law of attraction.
It's very, I mean, basically it is the law of attraction. That which we put out there comes back. But it's, you know, it's more than this. And I haven't gotten into this in my blog yet, but this will be in my book when it comes out. I call it spiritual creation. It's been said that we are not physical beings who have a spiritual experience every now and again. We are spiritual beings who are having a physical experience here on this earth. And I'm a big believer that we are co-creators with God. And I know this isn't, you know, I don't want to go religious. This certainly isn't religious, but it is definitely spiritual. And I believe that we can create spiritually with our minds and with our emotion. Here is a law that I have observed in the universe, and it's this, that all spirit desires flesh. You get that? Okay. Bob Proctor teaches that another word for spirit is energy. He teaches another word for energy is thought, okay, or emotion. So in other words, when we think a thought or we have an emotional feeling, we're actually creating a little spirit. We're creating life. We're creating this energy. And what's happening is that little spirit is going out into the universe looking desperately to be clothed. It wants to be embodied, right? And so this is why we continue to have more of what we think about. Because it's, I mean, imagine creating all these little negative spirits, right? This little spirit of a bounced check.